We're very honored to have Dr. Peter Hake with us today. He's the Director of Research and Development at Cotton Incorporated.
Imagine the profitability of that girl. That girl right there is North Carolina, early 1900s. She could do the work of 1,000 hand spinners. So think about that, replacing 1,000 people with one. That is outrageous profitability, and it was a competitive situation around the world versus England and then the rest of Europe. Obviously, it moved here in the East Coast, and tremendous investment in mechanization, being more efficient. The whole issue of merchandising cotton came out of this, but the world went from a fairly stagnated existence, went through the Industrial Revolution, and it was driven by cotton. And so cotton and science pretty much made the modern world. You all don't get credit for that enough. But cotton was the #1 industry, the first #1 industry around the world. So I'm going to look at about 4 things. We'll go through them pretty fastly. So we're going to cover a bunch of things that are sort of a little bit of science, a little bit. Some going to be a little edgy. Some will be a little bit super edgy. And I apologize ahead of time for anyone that I offend on that. I'm getting right the door here, RN, so no way to get out. But first, I'd like to talk about international and foreign. I've had the pleasure of having a job where I have to get on a plane every month to go somewhere. And so I visit a lot of these places. And these farmers walking their fields, they're just like you. They're not our threats. But there are actually threats out there that we do have to be hyper concerned about. And actually these farmers can help us with some of those threats. And I just wanted to go through some of these threats because the international is, I may be standing too close to that right there. The international component of agriculture, as we know with PEDD, porcine epidemic diarrheal virus, and bird flu, that we have some serious problems that come our way. And just the cotton examples, hopefully you're all familiar with the fusarium wilt they have in the San Joaquin Valley. So far it's been restricted to San Joaquin Valley. It's thought to have come from Asia. In California, they can deal with it. They can grow almonds and they can grow peanut. Almonds the #1 choice for that land if it gets fusarium, because once it gets fusarium, it's there, as long as we can sample it, like for decades. The second choice is to plant pima, because there's some tolerances within pima. If that comes here, we've got a real serious problem, because you obviously don't have those 2 options on that. The other one I'd like to talk about is common crow virus. And fortunately, that has not come here. White fly spread it. It's recently gone into China. When the Chinese had the Olympics, they brought in plants from all over, from other countries, and some of them had white flies on them, and some of those white flies had virus inside that white fly, and so they now have it. But we have a sister virus to cotton leaf crow virus called cotton leaf crumple. If those two could get together, we just don't know what their children are going to look like. It could be very unpleasant. Bacterial blight, there's been a lot of rapid looking right now across Texas and elsewhere, whether we have a different rate of bacterial blight that seems to be affecting a broader range of varieties, whether this has come from Africa. Hopefully within a month we'll have a better idea. Some hardcore scientists are looking at it. But probably the one that is the most immediate, because came in I think in late June, is this old world bollworm. And that's what eats up cotton elsewhere in the world. In fact, it has occurred everywhere except the Americas up until recently, maybe about 3 years ago when it came into Brazil. And we have been finding it for a long time at customs. But for the first time in June, it's actually found outside of customs in traps in Florida. And the reason this guy's such a bad actor is that he gets resistance to all sorts of insecticides really, really, really fast. And again, we have a kissing cousin to this guy called Zaya, and we don't know when those two get together and create children what kind of nightmare we're going to have. But these are all examples of how where these guys maybe it can give us some help, because they've had to deal with some of these threats for a lot longer than we have. But just the take-home message on this is one of my favorite movies from the 1950s, Think from Another World. The closing statement on that was watch to the stars. That's where the invaders are going to come from. And so we have to be super diligent, report suspicious behavior that you see in your fields. You know, you guys have an excellent extension service with pathologists, really top-notch weed, pathology, entomology. You see weird things in your field, let people know so that you take a look at it. We can stop these things early on. It'll be a real gift. But there's also some real opportunities from our foreign relationships as well. And we can learn some things, and obviously this is the no-brainer. This is what happens when your most typical fertilizer rate is 0, which is what it is in Africa. They get about 50 to 20 bushels of grain per year. You know, cotton, as you know, can tolerate extremely low fertilizer conditions. So that's a no-brainer. But these things get a little bit more complex. This is India, and India right now grows cotton at about 6,000 seeds per acre, and they grow these trees, and in between those trees, toward the end of the season, you get a lot of weeds coming in. This costs about 30% of the value of the crop to get it harvested, and they're going to want machine harvest. Likewise, China is an area that has had an abundance of labor. This mother right here sprays this crop every other day. This is in the mid-90s, and labor is available, and they did it. But they're going to have to move to machine harvesting. In China, I've been told the cost to get it harvested with hand pickers is now up to 50% of the value of the crop. India, 30%, just to get it to the edge of the field. So huge push for machine harvesting. And this is China right here. This is the area that they've gone to the largest amount of machine harvesting. What kind of quality problem do you think that's going to have? They put out 2 layers. They retrieve 1 layer. The other layer just gets ground up. They've got 30 years of grinding up this plastic in the soil. Contamination, right? Serious, serious contamination problems. This is India. See all the grass? These are plants. These are up over 6 feet tall. It's going to take a huge restructuring of their production system for them to be able to put any sort of harvester in these fields. And then things get even more complex. This is a military farm in China. As you know, the People's Liberation Army is a business entity, and one of the things they provide all sorts of services, some that we've talked about over here, but they grow cotton, and this is a cotton farm, and it's set up with some headquarters of gins, and you could, this is straight off Google Earth, and you can drill right down on these things and see an awful lot of Google Earth. This is 50,000 acres of just solid cotton. But and I had a chance to walk into these fields. These are incredibly high productive fields, very, very intense. The military labor, extremely educated agronomists. This is the chief agronomist. Actually, I found a 6-lot gold on this, right here. That's what they're doing, just looking at it. 6-lot golds, as you know, are fairly rare. And this guy said, oh, they're not too rare. Our agronomists have already seen 2 this year. Well, they have an army of people. They were looking at 50,000 acres. So I felt pretty good to have found one. But what the thing we can learn from these guys is look how far their latitude is, 43 north. That is just barely above the northern edge of Iowa. So that's a little bit into Minnesota on that. And they're getting higher irrigated yields than we are at 10 degrees less latitude. I'll move over here so you guys, so I don't block. At 10 degrees less latitude. So here's the annual weather, and the way these things work is these lighter colors show the confidence interval in the temperatures. Look what happens to the spring and the fall in northwest China versus what happens to you guys. What stands out to you on that? They're what?
Very cold.
Very cold, but also very, very tight. Look how it's extremely predictable in spring and fall, the weather is. In fact, if you have a calendar watch, you know what the weather is outside just by looking at it, because you know the time of the day, and you know the day of the year, and you can just read it, what the temperature is. And so that allows farmers to really, really push the limit, even though they're way up there. And Dr. John Zach's going to be talking a little bit about improvements in weather and how there's better weather forecasts and how farmers can use that. Because the more we can take this highly variable weather and drill down and predict what it's going to be a month out or a little bit further out, huge benefits for agriculture, particularly here in West Texas. So let me move to a totally different topic, the genomic revolution. And it's about 13 years ago, the first human genome was sequenced at a little bit over $1 billion. But now they're routine. In fact, this is my sort of simplified genome. And you can get fun things like, I know that I'm about 2.6% Neanderthal, and that I'm almost all Northern European. That's sort of fun stuff. Costs $100 to get that. But what you also get is some stuff that's really, really important for me personally, because this shows my health vulnerabilities. And I'll share it with you because it's good news. I tell you, if it was not good news, I don't think I'd be sharing it. But for 122 health risks, it tells me that I don't have any major vulnerabilities. And in fact, for some of these things that you hate to have problems with, my risk is 10% versus the average for males of prostate cancer, about 18. The real big one for me was Alzheimer's. I have a low chance of getting Alzheimer's. I can still get 4.3 versus the average 7.2. But that is really helpful information to have. And the only reason we have that is we have a human genome sequence. We now have the equivalent of a human genome sequence with upland cotton. It was published in May in Nature Biotech. And that's an extremely useful tool for doing a whole bunch of things in cotton. Some of the neat things it can do is that the plant breeders here, we got a couple people from the breeding companies, they put that in their pipeline as fast as possible. I'm sure they're applying it already. It saves a whole lot of tedious field work on some things. Fiber quality, disease resistance are probably the fastest things that we can use it for. But also corn has got so much money going into it. Here with 90 million acres of hybrid seed here in the U.S., there's 250 million hybrid corn acres around the world that's sold. So the amount of research investment is out of sight. And we love to leverage that. And if they got a corn genome, we have a cotton genome. So we can go and grab some good ideas from them before that. But also genome editing. I'll cover a couple of these here just briefly. But so here's the simplified version of how this thing works. And if you go back to wild cottons, they were diploids. That means there's just 2 copies of a gene. That's what you are. You guys are all diploids. Hopefully, you're all diploids here. I don't think you'd fit through the door if you were diploids or tetraploids, because you get like big strawberries. No, that's off-color joke. My apologies. So so cotton comes from these wild plants, and actually 4 of them, a minimum 4 of them, combined to make a tetraploid, and that led to the 2 commercial species. We know it happened twice to make those species, probably a couple more times, but probably no more than a dozen that survived. And so that narrowed down the germplasm dramatically. Man came along and said, you know, I like those ones that have a really long fiber. Let's grab those. Those were very rare, and it got narrowed even more. And the 20th century plant breeders said, nope, we're going to cherry pick the absolute best of that, and that's what we're going to put in a bag and sell to you guys all over the world. And so they had this tremendous narrowing of the germplasm that now we can reach back and grab something from that wild species that we really like, and we can get those traits, but we don't have to get the fiber with it. You can imagine that wild fiber, this brown stuff that doesn't look too good, you bring in those wild genes, you bring in wild fiber. So the genome allows you to just pick and choose what you want out of it and not bring that lousy fiber. The blues on these things are actually gorgeous because they still have to trap insects, but the fiber, they don't have to disseminate, they don't have to spin yarn. All they have to do is disseminate to that fiber, and so it's not very good. But another really cool thing that you can do with these is that you can do genome editing. And genome editing is the ability to go in and make a very specific change in the DNA. And it's an incredibly powerful tool. I think you need to be, as you see about this in the popular press, it's going to be very interesting because it opens up a new window to make changes in a whole bunch of crops we could change. Already it's been demonstrated, not commercialized, but demonstrated in wheat, rice, oranges, cattle, and goats. And the list is probably even longer since this was published in June. One of the things that I think would be really cool to do with genome editing is to push it all the way to putting a Pima fiber on an upland seed. And you're halfway there already. The companies have gotten us halfway. What this is the top bar is the average for the U.S. Pima crop. The bottom bar is the average for the U.S. upland crop. And so here's two varieties, the hydrogen 444 and the Vericox UA48. And they're right in there on the micronair, on the uniformity. The strength, they're about halfway. So we're halfway to having a Pima fiber on an upland seed. And we know if we look at upland fibers with a microscope, you see a few Pimas in there. So these are Pima-type fibers that are growing mixed in with the upland. So it's possible. The plant can do it. We just got to get it to do a little more. Another area I'd like to talk a little bit about is microbes, because that relates to what happens out here on the Ara and Lonnie's fields. This actually is a soybean root, and these are some fungi that are helping that. These things turn out to be incredibly helpful, and the major companies are investing in these like crazy because they see the benefits of these organisms. So Bayer spent $500 million in Monsanto, Syngenta, BASF, and DuPont. So there's a huge Koch Agronomics just purchased Mendel Biotech to do this in California. In fact, I visited with Koch Agronomics in California, and their chief agronomist was in Louisiana, and he just was able to go to Wichita, where their headquarters, and he was super excited. For him, living in Wichita is like living in heaven, and he just got relocated to the Bay Area. Needless to say, he's not a real happy camper. Wichita, Kansas, the Bay Area, California, totally different, and he's more of a Wichita type guy. But what the microbes, again, the human science pushes the limits and spends the big bucks, and we come behind in agriculture and reap not all the benefits, but we're able to piggyback on their success. And so they're looking at the parallels with the gut microbe and how it's incredibly important to eat a diverse diet. It's how incredibly important to not take super potent antibiotics that wipe out your guts. That's perfectly parallel with plants. And we can achieve that with 20 years of corn cotton rotation. It's got to be no-till, because every time you conventional till this is Florence, South Carolina, it just goes right back to that sandy soil. And John, again, is going to talk to you a little bit more about ways you can speed that process up, what we can do for a healthy soil that might be faster. So the last thing I want to talk about is cotton's threat. And we got an immediate threat. It is that women are dressing like this. They're actually dressing, not pushing it to the limit on this one. I apologize who I've offended here. But women are dressing themselves in clothes that come from oil, come from petroleum. That's what they love. That's what they're doing. And so this is cotton's market share here in the U.S. And we put a lot of emphasis on trying to find out what female consumers are doing on a quarterly by quarterly basis. So this is women's tops. And so this is cotton's then market share. And it is not a pretty story in terms of female purchases of cotton garments. Denim blue jeans. You think everyone would think that denim is cotton. Some people don't even know that denim is cotton. It's just they just think it's this mystery fabric. And so we're seeing even an erosion on women's denim blue jeans. So that's obviously a serious, serious threat. Us guys, we don't buy enough clothes to really count. We'd all go out of business if it was just guys buying clothes. We've got to have a female consumer. And this goes back to a battle that we've had with polyester for a long time. You know, in the 60s, polyester came out, and the analogy is that this is what cotton fiber looked like in the 60s. It was a mix match of things. Some long, some short, some thick, some fat. And this is what the Bic company came out with, a Bic pen made out of polyester in the 60s. And it cleaned our cloth. You know, because polyester could be predictable, everything was the same length, every pen worked, didn't have broken lead in it, it was awesome. So you responded, particularly here on the High Plains. You guys were the first to respond, and you put out a product that had dramatically higher strength. You remember that in the early 90s, massive acres went into a variety HS26 and Altex Atlas with incredible strength. And so you pushed it up, and then you pushed it another layer on up. You pushed it up with extremely long fibers as well. So the West Texas area has really been in the forefront of pushing cotton, so we have this to compete with synthetic fibers. But unfortunately, the synthetic industry can just keep innovating and innovating. You know, they can mix every last color they want and have fiber, all sorts of functionality. And so this is pretty much where we are on the competitive situation with cotton. So we've got to fight back with functionality, synthetic traits. Consumers want garments that do not just permanent press, but stain release and moisture, temperature control, and thermal characteristics. So there's a lot of emphasis going on trying to come up with those kind of characteristics, but without using fluorines or formaldehydes, and looking at thermal, microbial, antimicrobial, wearable. But also we've got to fight back with cotton's superior characteristics. There's some things that cotton just flat does a lot better than synthetics, and we've got to really push those hard. And we've got to come up with technologies. This is one that's so cool. This is a laser etcher that just shaves a certain amount off the cotton, and it will cut all the way through if you want it, and it doesn't work with polyester because polyester just melts. But you can add all sorts of really neat textures and colors, not colors, but looks, textures and imprints to cotton at either the garment or the fabric stage with these lasers. But the long-term threat, the one that really keeps me awake at night, is this one right here, is the fact that there's this PR value of recycled polyester. Taking a water bottle, these water bottles here, and converting that into fiber has huge PR benefits. They love recycling, and it's a total sham. And if you combine that with cheap oil, which makes cheap polyester, which makes cheap synthetic garments, we've got a serious threat. I just wanted to show you why this is a sham. We just had someone put the numbers together on polyester. This is virgin polyester. Here's how much goes to fiber. Here's how much goes to bottles, okay? Now the bulk of this stuff ends up going to waste, whether it's bottles or whether it's fibers. It goes to a landfill. But there's this minuscule little amount, and the width of these arrows is directly related to the amount of that actual weight that flows. There's this minuscule amount of bottles that goes back into making fiber. So the polyester industry is claiming, oh, we are hugely sustainable because we rely on recycled water bottles. When it's a minuscule amount, the amount of fiber back recycled to fiber is even less. 0.01 metric tons, million tons. This is 3.5 million tons. These are global numbers versus the virgin is 37 million tons. So it's less than 1/10 of the polyester fiber actually comes from recycled bottles. So we've got to fight back in a way that I know, again, I'm going to offend people. Moderate prices. If you could be profitable at moderate prices, that's really good for the health of cotton in the long term, because polyester can be made cheap. So we've got to figure out a way to be profitable with moderate prices. I shouldn't have said low prices there, I apologize. I should have said moderate prices with a group of growers with no door behind me on that. And I'll just cover a couple of things. One thing is, obviously, you have great access to expertise here. We just tried to accumulate this. We've got a new website we just launched cotton cultivated, you go to our website and type that in, you'll find it. It brings in, through Cotton Corporate, you are funding 295 extension specialists, university scientists. You've been doing that for about 40 years. So we've tried to pull as much of that together in an easy way to access. But also another thing is we've got to really push the PR. You all understand that the cotton consumer has an alternative. If they don't like our smell, they can go get something else, and then polyester is the choice. Every other agricultural product except biofuels, the consumer doesn't have a choice. They have to eat agriculture's products. So we've got this new one called Cotton Leads, and we've got all sorts of textile brands and retailers signing up, but they want to see data, they want to see metrics. So one of the flagship things we do is look at the field print. This is every 5 years, we've been able to show that using national metrics that we're doing better on soil erosion and irrigation water, energy a little bit, greenhouse gases are not making a whole lot of progress, and land use we're making progress. So the smaller that footprint gets, the better we can brag. But the real bragging points have come from when growers share their data, and this is the Natural Resource Survey we just completed. We had about 10% of the U.S. cotton acres respond, and we got some beautiful bragging rights. Here is the pounds of fiber per pound of nutrient for nitrogen, phosphate, and potash by the different regions. And the university recommendation for nitrogen is about 50 pounds per bale, which is 10 pounds of fiber per pound of nitrogen. Across the U.S., 10.9, 10.6, 10.5, 10.7. So average across the U.S., growers are extremely efficient with nitrogen. That's the big one. The other ones are all over the map, the phosphate and the potash. That's just what you'd expect because the soil variability, how much the soil provides, how much you get out of the rotation. So that's super good data. The last thing I'd like to just hit is that we've got to figure out a way to get cotton seed price up, because that doesn't impact the competition with polyester. The more you get for the seed, the more profitable you can be growing fiber on that. And so obviously when we have these small crops like we do, your last big crop was 2012, and this is the price at the dairy as a percent of how much the feed value is. So 100% is pretty much you're getting paid a fair price for your cottonseed at the dairy. Anything above that means the dairyman is willing to pay a premium for your product. And he only does that if it's a light crop. 2012, big crop. Going into 2013, it was a small crop. He had to bid up the price to get it. 14 and 15, and here's the latest numbers. I think that's the July number. Light crops give you a good price of seed because that dairyman will bid it up. So what we want to do is we want to take a large fiber crop and convert it into a small cottonseed crop. And one of the ways that you all have been investing to do that is with ultra-low gospel cottonseed. You all know cotton has gospel throughout the entire plant, and that's why the seed can only be eaten by ruminant animals. Monogastrics, chickens, pigs, humans, horses, dogs can't eat cottonseed, otherwise they get sterile and zinc deficient, iron to zinc deficient, and lysine deficient. So Texas A&M has figured out a way to take it just out of the seed and leave it in the rest of the plant. And we're looking at going after aquaculture as the place for that to go. And even if we can put in the early years a small percentage of the crop into aquaculture, that helps everyone, because that means that a big fiber crop is now a smaller seed crop. And we're looking at having regulatory submission first quarter of next year. So it's moving along. These things take a hell of a long time, but it's moving along. And I just wanted to show you the value pyramid is how we talk about right now cottonseed goes to cattle. We want to go to aquaculture. And you can feed these other things as well once you take the gospel out. Now, it's going to take a little bit more identity preservation to go after these high value. And we estimate to be similar to what you do with planting seed. Back in the old days when you caught the seed, you had to keep it separate. And we're demonstrating that using glandless right now as a way to work out all those bugs and details.